I think we'll get started. Welcome to beautiful historic chambers in City Hall here in beautiful downtown Summerside. So call to order. First, I guess we jump right into the planning board. So before we jump into calling to order, I'll call to order the planning board meeting for October 1st, 2024 here in the city of Summerside at 5:01 p.m. Before we move into approval of agenda, I'll just take a quick couple of housekeeping notes. Councillor Snow is attending family matters and is joining us via telephone, I think, and probably also by video. And also for, we put a notice out last week following the last public meeting. Council met and had a discussion and decided to take the Housing Accelerator Fund vote off for today, and it will be scheduled for October 21st, which will be the same day as we will be swearing in a new councillor for Ward 5. So that will be a busy and exciting evening here in Chambers. So that is not on the agenda here tonight. If anyone is here just specifically for that, you're welcome to stay for the rest. Or head home and have something to eat and enjoy the rest of the beautiful day. With that, we'll move on to approval of agenda for planning board. Councillor Duran, do you want me to hand that over to you, or? I'll call for. Sure, I'll go up to number 4. So I'll call for a motion to approve the planning board agenda as presented. That would have to come from a member of planning board, Councillor Morrison, Councillor Duran, and Councillor Snow, all members of planning board. Moved by Councillor Duran, seconded by Councillor Morrison. All in favor of the agenda as presented, please say aye. And Councillor Snow is there as well. The agenda is approved. At this point, we begin each one of our meetings here in the city of Summerside by acknowledging the land upon which we gather is unceded Mi'kmaq territory. Abagway is covered by the historic treaties of peace and friendship. We pay our respects to the indigenous Mi'kmaq people who have occupied this island for over 12,000 years, past, present, and future. I'd also take a moment today to note that October 1st, 2024, as of 6 years ago, was declared Treaty Day here in the province of Prince Edward Island. I attended the ceremony this morning in Charlottetown with a variety of members from across the province, and it is an important and valuable exercise and day here across our island. It's also National Seniors Day. There's all kinds of days. It's also National Seniors Day today, and I know the city of Summerside had a number of events on throughout the city, and I was able to attend one of those. At this point, I'll call for a conflict of interest for any member of planning board or member of council who will be sitting in on the meeting with respect to either of the two items before you. Hearing none, I will now hand it over to our chair of planning board, Councillor Duran.
All right, thank you, Your Worship. I guess 2 items on for this evening. Item number 1, official plan and zoning amendment application for 210 Greenwood Drive. The purpose of the official plan and zoning amendment is to allow a residential housing development. Background, an application from Darcy McDonald for PID number 308593 to amend the city official plan from industrial land use to residential land use and amend the zoning bylaw from light industrial M1 zone to high density residential R4 zone. The purpose of the zoning amendment is to allow apartment development, 2 to 3 24-unit buildings in the proposed R4 zone. A public meeting was held on September 16th, 2024, and council gave first reading on the same date. Report. Under section 5.7 of the zoning bylaw, when planning board reviews a zoning bylaw amendment, it has to consider the following general criteria as applicable. Under section 8.4 of the Parks and Green Space Plan, the criteria of B, C, E, G, and H must be considered. A, conformity with all requirements of this bylaw. Staff comment, the proposed high-density residential R4 zoning amendment conforms to the bylaw as the bylaw allows rezoning of lands as per section 5.9. The proposed development will be required to meet the development standards of the proposed R4 zone. B, conformity with the official plan. Staff comment, section 5.6 of the Summerside official plan describes council's policies for industrial development. Section 5.2.2, location of high-density housing, describes council's policies for location of high-density housing. The proposed amendments will not impact the Parks and Green Space Plan. Section 5.6.1 in part states, there are a number of areas across the city zoned for industrial use, including 2 large areas located respectively around Greenwood Drive, which includes the Summerside Industrial Park. Council's intent is to promote a functional system of special purpose industrial areas which are each suited to attracting quality industries in their respective market segments. And the city's future industrial areas are shown on the future land use plan. They include all presently zoned industrial lands and additions to the Greenwood Drive industrial area. The general purposes of the M1 zone in part states 5 areas are designated for light industrial. It goes on to list which those 5 areas are and where they're located, but for this evening, the Greenwood Drive industrial area, which does have large vacant sites and will be further expanded in size, is one of those areas. The Greenwood Drive industrial area has been expanded in 2 places. First, a strip at the south end of Greenwood Drive has been rezoned from commercial to industrial use to better reflect the nature of existing businesses in that area. And second, a large vacant parcel to the west of Greenwood Drive and south of the Confederation Trail, which had been zoned partly for industrial use and partly for low-density residential use, is now reserved completely for light industrial. The goal is to support a planned industrial strategy for the city to attract desirable new industries and special purpose industrial areas with a focus on quality industrial park development, transportation, accessibility, and minimization of conflicts with other land uses. Council's objective is to allow industrial development in various zones, and the following are Council's statements of policy. There are 3 which are more suited to this application, and I will, I guess, sorry, 4. There are 4 that are more suitable for this application. I'll go through those. The others are certainly available. So the following are Council's statements of policy. Promote a functional system of industrial areas, each focusing on a particular industrial zone as follows, and A is Greenwood Drive. In light industrial zones, to promote appropriate industries as permitted uses along with supporting commercial businesses. In light industrial zones, to promote a combination of industries in quality industrial park developments, and require appropriate buffer strips where industrial or commercial uses either adjoin any other non-agricultural zone, except where a commercial use is in an industrial zone, except where a commercial use in an industrial zone adjoins a commercial zone. And further examine the city's industrial needs as part of its economic development strategy, 2011, including possible needs for an eco-business park industrial area, the adequacy of remaining growth capacity at the Greenwood Drive industrial area, and the need for timely extensions of infrastructure to the St. Eleanor's industrial area. Section 5.2.2, location of high-density housing. Council intentions about locating high-density housing are important to residents concerned about potential location of row houses and apartment buildings into their predominantly low-density neighborhoods. To help allay these concerns, Council lays out specific policies below on where they may allow future high-density housing, some of which elaborate on their foregoing policies for special planning and development areas. And that location criteria, 3 of those criteria pertain to this case, and those are the desirability of locating high-density housing close to jobs, community facilities and services, and of promoting pedestrian access. Opportunities for maximizing the number of opportunities for scenic views through higher density and tolerant residential buildings, but with protection of adequate view planes, and avoidance of negative economic and physical impacts on surrounding land uses, whether existing or proposed. Council's objective, to encourage high-density housing in specific areas. The following are Council's statements of policy. 1, to promote high-density housing on properties already partly developed for high-density housing. 2, consider applications for high-density housing in the following situations. 3, a mix of housing types and CDAs. 4, areas presently occupied by conforming mobile home parks. 5, rezonings in areas presently designated for medium-density R3 zone residential use. 6, areas immediately north of the downtown, defined as Notre Dame Street to the north, Granville Street to the east, Heather-Moyse Drive to the south, and Duke Street to the west, subject to no harmful impacts on local heritage housing within residential or commercial buildings. 7, downtown D zone. 8, city arterial or collector roads as referenced in section 7.1 and figure 7-1. And 9, consider applications for high-density housing in other areas with careful consideration of council's location criteria listed above. C, suitability of the site for the proposed development. Staff comment, the site can accommodate the proposed residential land use being proposed. D, compatibility of the proposed development with surrounding land uses, including both existing and projected uses. Staff comment, the subject property abuts 3 existing land uses. The land uses to the south, west, and a portion of the east are light industrial M1 land uses. The land uses to the east is a mix of service commercial C2 and institutional I. And the land use to the north is high-density residential R4. The change from light industrial to residential land use would be compatible with the abutting existing and future land uses. The subject property land use is light industrial, however, it has been vacant for several years. Consideration should be given to add industrial lands elsewhere in the city. E, any comments from residents or other interested persons? Staff comment, a public meeting was held on September 16th, 2024. The public meeting notice was advertised in the September 4th edition of The Guardian. 18 letters were mailed to 17 property owners. Clifford McQuaid presented on behalf of Darcy McDonald an overview of the development and noted that the housing is needed in the community and the proposed development is intended to be 3 to 4 24-unit buildings, providing it meets the development standards, building area, parking, etc. of the R4 zone. F, adequacy of existing water, sewer, road, stormwater, and electrical services, city parking and parklands for accommodating the development and any projected infrastructure requirements. Staff comment, the city's water supply in the area is adequate for the zoning change and the sewage treatment plant can handle the loading. All new water and sewer infrastructure required for this site will be at the developer's cost. There is an existing ditch system abutting the east side of this property on Greenwood Drive and in the southern boundary along Mill Crescent, which will be adequate to accept the drainage from this property. There are 2 local city streets abutting this property, Greenwood Drive and Mill Crescent. Both can be accessed by this property. Electrical grid in the area is adequate to support new R4 development for the zoning change. As the developer works on their plans for the land and later permit submittals, they will need to reach out to Summerside Electric to discuss how and where the electrical can extend into their project. The proposed development will have to meet on-site parking requirements of the R4 zone. There is a park, Maple Heights Park, located within 650 meters of the site. G, impacts from the development on pedestrian or vehicular access and safety and on public safety generally. Staff comment, the proposed development can achieve access via Mill Crescent and or Greenwood Drive. Either street can accommodate the traffic from the proposed development. There is an active transportation pathway along the east side of Greenwood Drive extending from Pope Road sidewalk to Water Street. H, compatibility of the development with environmental, scenic, and heritage resources. Staff comment, not applicable. I, impacts on city finances and budgets. Staff comment, not applicable. J, other matters as specified in this bylaw. Staff comment, since 1998, the city has approved 30 acres of land from industrial land use to residential and or commercial land use. The city also approved 5 acres of land from residential land use to industrial land use, resulting in a loss of 25 acres of industrial land use to date. K, other matters as considered relevant, and there are none. Staff review. City staff are not opposed to the application from Darcy McDonald for 308593 to amend the city official plan from industrial land use to residential land use and amend the zoning bylaw from light industrial M1 zone to high-density residential R4 zone. Staff caution council on rezoning the light industrial M1 lands along Greenwood Drive for residential development. Please find the planning officer's comments below regarding the current M1 zoned lands. And comments from economic development staff are provided as an attachment to this report as well. The planning officer comments, the subject property is approximately 3.2 acres in area. Council's policies noted in this report do not explicitly prohibit council from changing the official plan future land use map from industrial to residential with respect to the current application. However, removing 3.2 acres of employment lands, industrial, and designating to residential does not align with council's economic growth strategy in section 3.7.1 of the official plan and policy number 7 highlighted on page 3 of this report. And just the excerpt of section 3.7.1 of the official plan. highlighted with respect to this specific application. Targeted industrial growth strategies are required to demonstrate the city's commitment to growth in these sectors. The planning officer recommendation, if council approves this change to the official plan, future land use plan map, Schedule B, 1, council direct staff to start identifying potential new industrial growth areas on the future land use plan that make up the equivalent acres being redesignated to commercial/residential. 2, the text of the official plan in section 5.6 for industrial lands would need to be amended, as well as the map figure in this report. And 3, as a caution, location and zoning of new industrial lands is not a straightforward process. Residents will have concerns of new industrial zone lands if located near residential zone lands. The outskirts of the city or agricultural lands may have the land mass required, but may have costly servicing constraints or provincial highway access issues. As per section 5.10, part B3 of the zoning bylaw, the planning board shall make a recommendation to council on this application before it is approved or denied. The planning board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward to council for a final decision. And the planning board recommendation, the application received from Darcy McDonald for PID number 308593 to amend the city official plan from industrial land use to residential land use and amend the zoning bylaw from light industrial M1 zone to high density residential R4 zone be recommended to be approved by council. And attached to the package is the letter from Economic Development Director Mike Thatuska, rezoning request for employment lands to residential at 210 Greenwood Drive. Are there any questions or comments from council? Councillor McCollum.
I had sent in an email today with questions pertaining to this information. I just, as a point, I am wondering if you are going to read this report that Director Thasuska has provided for us. I think there's very valid points.
I'm happy to read it. It's part of the package that's available, but at the same time, we're here. I'm more than happy to just read it. It's just a couple pages with fairly large font. So, if you'd like me to read it, I have no problem doing
Well,
so.
I guess for me, I look at it and I think he makes some very important points that have quite a lot of impact on what we are doing, what we are deciding. And I think there's different excerpts. And I guess I just find it a little confusing that he speaks to some of the things about the longer term erosion if we continue to use industrial land. And I think it's incumbent upon us to hear those things from our staff, because we've just gone through some formal meetings where we have talked about that we really need to listen. And for me, as only one council member, I think it's really important.
I will. I'll read that in the minutes now. Again, there might be people listening that don't have access to the package as well. So
I would appreciate it.
I read the development officer's sort of notes there, so I'll read the economic development directors as well, if that's okay with everyone. So again, yeah, so this is sort of a memo from Mike Thatuska, Director of Economic Development. It is dated September 20th of this year. The Economic Development Department was asked to provide comments on a recent request to rezone employment lands to residential on a lot at 210 Greenwood Drive. The Economic Development Department frequently examines employment assessments as a key factor in projecting community growth, especially when developing strategic attraction and retention strategies to ensure Summerside's long-term sustainability. These analyses help gauge the capacity, vitality, and revenue potential for both the municipality and end users. While residential development is undeniably a significant driver of community growth, and the relationship between housing and employment is essential for long-term sustainability and diversification, residential use alone should not dominate our land use strategy. A recently commissioned planning document from the Mayor's Task Force on Housing provided clear data indicating that there are sufficient existing residential lands to meet future growth demands. This reduces the need for sporadic rezoning, especially in predominantly industrial areas like the one in question. According to the W6 planning document, determining the supply of land available for housing is important in planning for growth, but it is equally important to ensure employment lands remain balanced to support this residential scope. Although this particular report focuses on residential land, the Economic Development Department emphasizes that employment lands must also be protected as part of good community planning principles and should also be incorporated into our long-term strategies. The report further notes that the city must understand whether there is sufficient land available for development in areas already zoned for housing, but misses the importance of understanding the demand for employment lands, understandable outside the scope of their engagement. These lands sustain employment growth, support municipal revenue, and contribute to the overall vitality of the city. While short-term gains from developing lands and repurposing buildings might stimulate the economy temporarily, the longer-term erosion of serviced lands could undermine business investment confidence, limit the city's capacity to diversify its business base, and strain economic vitality. A balance between immediate opportunities and long-term sustainability is crucial for strategic planning and community growth. Some key considerations include: 1, limited employment space. Summerside has a limited supply of space available for employment use. 2, preservation of employment lands. Protecting the integrity of employment lands is a priority for economic development and the city as a whole. 3, zoning and planning guidelines. While amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw are normal, these documents were designed to preserve the industrial zoning and intent of specific land clusters as a matter of principle. And 4, historical rezoning effects. Since 2012, rezoning of key industrial properties has weakened the employment land's attractiveness and cost competitiveness by allowing non-conforming uses to continue to erode our cluster of employment-based lands. In a 2021 memo concerning a previous rezoning request, the department had made some suggestions in relation to a process forward, specifically to initiate and the text seems to disappear. So specifically to initiate something. At a minimum, institute a more robust test of rezonings of industrial/employment building stock until a comprehensive review and demand study is completed. Establishment of a formal strategy and policy, specifically when converting employment lands to non-employment uses in addition to our traditional review. Extra tests to ensure longer-term protection of employment opportunities, especially when it comes to limited building stock. Employment lands assessment to forecast long-term needs and protect employment lands. This assessment would redefine employment land zones and develop strategies for protecting these lands and ensure that conversions of employment lands to non-employment lands undergo rigorous review. Specifically, the request at the time was to undertake much like the housing strategy. While housing remains a pressing concern, it's important not to overlook the need for commercial and industrial development, which is vital to Summerside's long-term future prosperity. Economic development recognizes the importance of reinvesting in vacant industrial land to address immediate gaps in the economy, but is concerned that the ongoing trend of industrial rezoning is pushing us toward a point where our ability to attract and retain industrial investment may be irreversibly compromised. While it would be preferable to see this development occur on more appropriately zoned lands, we understand the need to capitalize on current opportunities. However, all stakeholders must recognize that this trend cannot continue if we are to build and sustain a vibrant economy for the future. Respectfully submitted, Mike Thatuska, Director of Economic Development. It was longer than I thought, but it's okay. Still breathe.
I guess that's what I was going to bring up, because I think it's in the planning officer's first recommendation that council direct staff to identifying potential new industrial growth areas. When we gave up the property on Greenwood Drive and turned that to residential, it was stated at that time that the city look at new areas for industrial zones there, and apparently we haven't looked, and now we're letting another one fall. The other concern I had too is the old government garage. That's light industrial, I believe. Is it, Linda? And we're not sure what's going to happen there, and so we got to be careful of what we're rezoning. I know we need housing, and that parcel would probably be a great fit for it, but we need to pay attention to the comments from these two gentlemen, that, you know, our planning officer and our economic development officer. They just, you know, it was basically, they're both saying the same thing. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
I just had a quick, what was the date of the document that's referred to the Mayor's Task Force on Housing, a recently commissioned planning document from the Mayor's Task Force on Housing? What was the date on that? Like, was that, do we have a? 23? Okay. I just wanted that to be noted. A recently commissioned planning document from the Mayor's Task Force on Housing provided clear data indicating that there are sufficient existing residential lands to meet future growth demands. This reduces the need for sporadic rezoning, especially in predominantly industrial areas like the one in question. So I'm assuming that also goes for other areas other than industrial.
Just, I have a question on one paragraph here, and I'll read it because would help probably with my question, but it says the Greenwood Drive industrial area has been expanded in 2 places. First, a strip at the south end of Greenwood Drive has been rezoned from commercial to industrial use to better reflect the nature of existing businesses in that area. Second, a large vacant parcel to the west of Greenwood Drive and south of the Confederation Trail, which had been zoned partly for industrial use and partly for low-density residential use, is now reserved completely for light industrial.
Eco Park.
Thank you. Yeah, I
I
was
think
getting
it's a
my
little-
east and west, yeah, I got it now, because I was thinking the other side of the street, because I thought that was recently, there was a request there for rezoning where we might have changed it to R4.
That was the one I think you're thinking of is the one that went down to over to Valley Street, and there was a
Right.
future connection type thing. And yeah,
Right.
that was sort of, I think that was a stepped kind of R1 to R3, or not R1 rather. but-
Those statements
Or
are in the
forget.
official plan, but things have happened since the original, or the most recent, was it '08 or? Yeah, '08. So those are statements that are still in the '08 document, quoting right out of it. So yes, there was changes since then in but the lower section of Greenwood Drive was a mix of a bunch of commercial businesses, and so they got rezoned all the way to the bottom, I think almost to Notre Dame Street there.
Okay, so was that original parcel? It wasn't industrial or light industrial, was it, that on the east side, south of the trail of Greenwood Drive?
So the businesses on Greenwood Drive that are existing today were pretty much all commercial at one
Yes.
time. Then they were rezoned to light industrial, just because of some of them were heavy equipment repair
Yeah.
and recycling depot and that type of
Yes.
thing. And then one of those businesses since got flipped back to commercial, which is the one on the very corner of Greenwood Drive, where I'll say it's a kind of a commercial mall right now.
Yeah.
The old Johnson's Tire
Yes.
Center, yeah.
Okay, and my only other question, and it says in here in 2 different places that the applicant, or it might just be a typo on one of them, but in one spot it says 2 to 3 24-unit buildings. On the second spot it says 3 to 4 24-unit buildings. So I know it's early on.
But that's what we received in the initial application. Then when the representative for the owner spoke at the meeting, it wasn't jiving exactly what the original, so they said, we may fit 3 or 4. Like I say, they didn't size up yet how big of buildings they were gonna go, but on the
Yeah.
original application, I think it said 3 24s, but then when the representative was here, they stated something different, so we don't have a firm confirmation other than it's gonna be high density and multiple number of buildings when they go to set out the total number of units.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. It's sort of tacking on to what Councillor Morrison was just saying. So when we developed the Eco Park, we had to rezone. Part of that land was R4 and residential, and we had to go through a rezoning. So it mentions in the report that we would have to look for additional light industrial land, but I think we've already, in some ways, have done that over the years as well. When I look at this property, I just see how it already abuts or connects to existing R4 properties, and the location of it being close to the active transportation and Greenwood Drive, tax center, employment, some of the important factors we take in when we're looking at rezoning and high density housing. I think there's an argument to be said that maybe we've already made that exchange of land. I'm curious, and it's searching the report, but I'm working off the laptop with a small little screen here. So what is the exact size of the parcel that's rezoned? How many acres?
This parcel that's being considered is 3.2 acres. The
So when we
the parcel I think that Councillor Snow is referring to was added to our existing industrial park, the Innovation Avenue. That was a 5-acre piece of R4 land that was changed to industrial lands.
Exactly, that was my point. So I guess I was trying to make was that I think we're already have made or possibly have found additional lands that would make up that land that's asking to be rezoned. So if it's just asking, unless we're of the thought that we need additional lands on what we already had, I think we've already made that exchange of industrial for residential previously, so we might have been ahead a little bit.
I guess just to clarify, I see a look on a couple of people's faces. The Eco Park land itself, I forget the total acreage, the strip along Greenwood Drive was zoned industrial. The back land from the rest of it all the way to the trail, that was residential. So that was a portion that was converted from R4 to industrial at the time for that development. The note is that is noted there, like there's just been multiple ones throughout the years, and we're saying there's lots of opposition to even R2 going in next to R1 or R4 going in somewhere. This is a whole nother level of permitted uses that would be in the M1 that are probably going to be harder to find locations to put within close proximity to existing development. And then as noted, once you go farther out to try and get a far enough distance away, you don't have the servicing. So you're going to have to try and get servicing costs, water and sewer, to these locations that are, I'll say, not in orderly and following. There's going to be a long gap of land to get servicing to it, let alone the servicing for the land itself. So
I guess my question was, have we already made up that land that's asking to be rezoned? So are we losing industrial land currently, or with the addition of
the
Eco
first
Park?
paragraph states we're down probably 25 acres, whereas that was only a 5-acre parcel. So we're down 20 acres or so of M1 land, yeah. Overall, you know. And as they're stating, it's the trend of, okay, if you have enough, but you don't want to have it previously just all in one owner or one location, and that's not suitable for a certain development, and then you're stuck saying I can't find a development because it's either one person doesn't want to sell or it's not the right land fit for.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I guess, look, I'm not totally against this. I had just questions around it, and the reason I'm questioning it is, just like I had stated, we need to be careful giving up so much light industrial area without identifying new zones or new parcels that we can go to. I guess my question being is, now that we're in the midst of an official plan change, and I know there's a million balls in the air, but is this one of them? That, you know, this is the time when you change, you identify. I know a few years ago when we did an official plan, we identified zones of where we thought commercial should be and where light industrial should be. So if we're in the middle of changing our official plan, I think city should take a real good look and identify where can these future industrial lands be? Just, just my thought.
I would agree that it's, right now, we're looking at, I guess, we had a number of, I'll say, smaller items over the last 3 or 4 years that have come about through rezonings or questions from yourselves that, okay, when we look at it, we have a number of those smaller ones that we've been waiting until the other process was not to confuse it and it would get finished, and so we wouldn't have overlapping packages per se. None of those are of I'll say a larger magnitude like you'd be speaking of for this. This we would identify as something that should be, I'll say, not going to say done separate, but at least on its sole effort so that it's not overlapping or confused with something else. And if there's other small things, it solely would be, it's a big issue to have and to change lands. So I would see that being a specific report coming forward, not necessarily in with 15 other things. And the other 14 things may be all valid things. They're all going to get tied up in this process with this one major thing so that's where we are, is that we have a number of, as you know, we'll call them the half, even with the half ones, there was other things that were done at the same time. We have staff have a list of other ones that were done internally by the staff itself, which we've gone over and are preparing to bring forward to you in the next month to say, here's another number of smaller changes that we thought. And if this is a specific one, we may still have to say, okay, we want direction to say we are going to try and target this and look at some lands and try to get I'll say a separate or a sole document, so you're not confused and saying we're meeting tonight on, and that clouds over the other 14 other things that might be on the docket.
Great. No, I just think it's important that we have that top of mind. So.
I hate to be the one to ask another question, but you're our engineer, our city's engineer. And could you explain or expound a little bit, Director Aaron, on what you mean that we could run into big issues? Like for somebody that might not understand or might not have the information, what do you mean by that?
On this topic of M1 zoning is probably a bigger, what's going to abut it, who's going to be close to it, what are the permitted uses. There's going to be more, I'll say, objection perhaps, or contrast between residential and industrial lands. That's typically so finding land that's going to be agreeable to a number of people is going to be a challenge, right? And we're saying we already have it, and that's why we're saying it's great. There's, as noted, you have a dire need now in certain locations, but as stated by Councillor Renewable, we have to be cautious in the staff report of continuing to do this and making you aware of the net effect that you're decreasing your, as other staff have noted, your amount of land that's already permitted to allow development of this industrial to try and drive your commercial or worker employment sector. And it's a challenge to get land zoned from one zone of residential to another, let alone getting it to go to industrial. There may still be smaller cases of types of industrial that would be, but there's a list of other things that are permitted that tends to be, oh, well, once it's there, it could be the worst case, and it could happen. Like, I'll say the worst case or the most offensive to some, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I got a couple of quick questions. Is the applicant the owner? Because we had someone else speak to it when this was introduced to council.
The applicant, and we've been advised, is the owner, Darcy McDonald, and the presenter, he was going to be out of province for another matter for work, and the applicant, or the presenter said that was his son-in-law, and he was speaking on behalf of presenting the information on behalf of the owner, his son-in-law.
Okay.
So Darcy's the owner, Clifford's the father-in-law. That's what Clifford was representing him at the meeting because his son-in-law was out of province.
Just to confirm, who was the applicant on the Greenwood Drive, south on Greenwood Drive, on the east side to the R3R rezoning we did last year? Was that Darcy? Was that Cliff? Was that Peter?
It was a company called Camco, which the president is Clifford McQuaid.
So it was Cliff as well, okay. I don't have any other further comments. I think council touched on on all of the relevant points, and certainly as a member of planning board, I have concerns wherever there may be, I have concerns with section 5.6 of the official plan, the loss of light industrial, the difficulty in getting industrial back into the land supply mix. and concerns with the lack of alignment with the economic growth strategy. I'm really happy that we had comments from Planning Department and from Economic Development on this matter before us today.
Okay. I think the thing that is sort of weighing on me, not so much as planning board chair, but as a councillor, is that when we questioned, when we asked the question to the presenter last meeting, sort of what was the intent of the buildings, and he specifically kind of alluded to that they would be higher end when asked, will these be affordable or whatever. I think, to me, when I sort of weigh the losing of the light industrial versus getting more of these higher end units that may be or will be out of reach to so many, I hesitate a bit, considering the cautions that were presented by staff. That being said, as chair, I'm certainly prepared to move it forward to council for a decision and take the next couple of weeks to sort of consider those items and the criteria of the report. But I just, that's sort of the ideas that come to mind is how, and we get presenters to come in and sort of explain, I think, for that reason, to sort of give us an idea of what the plans are. So if it's wrong of me to sort of consider those things, then, I mean, what's the point of even having them get up there in the first place? So anyway, that's what I'm sort of kind of going through right now, but I realize we don't have to make a decision at this point. And again, from a planning board perspective, I realize that it sort of meets the general, use of the land, and we just read the report, and there's a lot of things that conform correctly. So as planning board chair, I'm prepared to move it forward, but I do have those concerns as a councillor that I think I'll be thinking about for the next couple of weeks. So if there's nothing additional, I guess we can just move through with the recommendation again. So I will move it, and I would ask for a seconder from Planning Board, Councillor Morrison. And I'll read that recommendation again. The application received from Darcy McDonald for PID number 308593 to amend the city official plan from industrial land use to residential land use and amend the zoning bylaw from light industrial M1 zone to high-density residential R4 zone be recommended to be approved by council, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Morrison. All members of Planning Board in favor of, and I always get the sort of the intent of these Planning Board votes sort of mixed up, but I guess all members of Planning Board in favor of endorsing the application to council, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? His worship. So regardless of how that would have went, it still goes to council, I guess, on October 21st, along with everything else that will be on that monthly meeting. And that is all I have for that item. Councillor McColeman, yes.
I guess to me, again, it's just a point of order. I really appreciated you reading that document in from Director Thasuska. And I would just like to point out that when we have anything like that, I know we're responsible for reading it, but I also think that when people are listening or in the gallery and they don't see that in black and white, I think it's very important that we read anything like that into the minutes so that we have a record of it, that we've done our due diligence. But also, I think there's things that I would say I discovered tonight in hearing that again, that we really need to know those things to make a very informed decision. So I think those things should be read into the minutes, even helping if we have to. Thank you.
I agree. I guess the only thing I would sort of add to that is sometimes the reports are supplemented by 20, 30-page things. But I mean, it might be something that we sort of, on a case-by-case sort of, maybe that's not the right way to look at it either. But I get it. This is very important to read. But if it was a 40-page, would we do it? But I guess it sort of depends on what the subject is and what the additional content is. But I agree. Yeah, no, we should be We should be reading that, especially since we just read one from the development officer. Why wouldn't we also read one from economic development?
We would give you 2 glasses of water.
Deal. I'll do the 30 pages. The next item is an application for a mobile sales establishment for 188 Milton Avenue. The purpose of the application is to allow a mobile sales establishment to operate at 188 Milton Avenue. Background, the purpose of the application is to allow a mobile sales establishment to operate at 188 Milton Avenue. Mr. Singh's proposed hours of operation are 11 a.m. to 9 p.m., Monday through Saturday. Mobile sales establishment means a business located in a motorized vehicle or movable structure that is towed or moved by a motorized vehicle, and where all of the goods, wares, or foodstuffs that are offered for sale are contained entirely within the motorized vehicle or movable structure, but does not include a lunch truck. Report, under Section 3, City of Summerside Licensing Bylaw CS 21, the bylaw states the following, and this is from Part 13, Mobile Sales Establishment License, or Section 13 rather. A, any person or company seeking a license to operate a mobile sales establishment in the city shall make application therefore to the council. B, licenses may be granted for a mobile sales establishment to conduct business on a maximum of 2 locations in the city, and each application shall be accompanied by a letter of permission from the owner or owners of the property on which the mobile sales establishment will be located. C, council shall allow or refuse the application based upon considerations of safety, desirability, impact on established businesses in the city, public convenience, and such other considerations as it deems appropriate. D, council may attach terms and conditions to the approval of the license if granted, including but not limited to 1, hours and days of operation, 2, health code requirements, 3, litter control, and 4, approved locations. E, the license for a mobile sales establishment shall be valid for the calendar year in which the application is made only. A new application is required to council for each calendar year. And F, no appeal shall lie from a decision of council respecting a mobile sales establishment license. Staff comments. Mr. Singh owns the property, therefore written permission from the property owner is not required. This will be Mr. Singh's first year to operate a mobile sales establishment. Recommendation, staff do not support the city granting a mobile sales establishment license to the applicant, Jagtar Singh, as this property is zoned residential. The city did approve a mobile sales establishment on a residential zone property in April of 2024 at 480 Central Street. The planning board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward for council for a final decision. Planning board recommendation, the application from Jagtar Singh to allow a mobile sales establishment to operate at 188 Milton Avenue be recommended to be approved by council. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Adams.
I have 2. So the one that says we approved at 480 Central Street, was that,
That was Corey Arsenault.
that was the Simply for Life?
Big guy, I think I
Oh, the
bigger
big
burger in front
guy.
of me.
Okay, all right. So it's not at a house, it's at the apartments there? Is that where it was? Okay. And what is it? What's he selling?
It doesn't say. It just says mobile sales establishment.
Sorry, he's selling food.
Food?
Yep.
Do letters get mailed out for these mobile? No, so there's, so if it's at an apartment, we have no way of knowing if everyone, yeah, I don't know, is it an apartment? Granville and Milton, trying to, it is a
This-
house,
This is a single-family home.
single family home. So, I mean, do we have no way of really knowing if the neighbors are okay with the coming and going of, like, it's a more dense area than Upper
Well-
Central Street would have been.
Right. And that's a great question, because that's where I was going to, because we had an experience with one in an area that it didn't turn out great, and it was constant complaints. So they don't fit in a residential area. And I'm kind of surprised that we don't send letters out to the neighboring, and I'm not sure why we don't. It must be just what we do. Is it, it's not required under our bylaws, Aaron? Is it?
Although planning board brings this forward, this mobile licensing is part of your licensing bylaw. It's not part of your, but we tend to bring them forward as far as a land use thing. So this is just a process in your licensing bylaw. We bring it forward as we're asked to look at the land use issues. So that's why it wouldn't be in a rezoning portion or process.
So it's something I think that should be there. So I guess my question would how do we get it there? That if somebody is going to open up a hot dog stand beside me, I'd be very shocked if they open tomorrow. And
That'd be doing a review of your licensing bylaw.
Okay,
Thank you, as far as, go ahead.
yeah, I would recommend that.
I think up until the application at Central Street, I don't know of any that were ever approved in
I
a
know,
residential
and I
zone.
was-
We basically,
Yeah,
the trend was to keep them in commercial areas.
I was just thinking that myself, so, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm just sort of bringing up the Google sort of, it looks like a very sort of narrow area. I don't know how traffic and parking and all that work. I mean, it's a concern for me.
So, but even though the other one, the one we approved before was in a residential, it's sort of a different looking residential area compared to this, right? It's a high traffic, lots of parking, commercial all around
Yeah.
it.
The
It's-
480 Central Street was essentially on a parking lot.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know what I mean? It's, even though, yes, we did approve on a residential, it's sort of, is a residential, but it's totally different.
I'm just going back to the point that Councillor McDougall, you made that in the area and for your ward. I believe some of the residents had concerns about the smell of the food cooking and the grease and things like that because it was so in such close proximity to the other homes in that area, where possibly this one would be the same on a residential lot.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we also started that food truck zone at the East Bay Walk parking lot this year. I don't know if councillors have been to the Go Fish and the TLC treats. It's fantastic. It's worked out really well. There's been a lot of people there and have used that space and using the seating area. It's been great. I certainly don't think food trucks belong in driveways.
And I would agree, and as planning board chair or a planning board member, I don't think I'm prepared to endorse this. Obviously, it's council's decision, but I would ask that if anybody from planning board would like to, that we would need a mover and a seconder. And if not, I guess it still goes to council. It just won't have the recommendation from planning board. And hearing none, this will move to the council meeting on October 21st without the recommendation of.
You still want to move, I recommend, you still want to move and second it, and then if the wish of the planning board is to vote against it, then everyone can vote against it. Planning
So,
board is supposed to make a recommendation.
Yeah.
We always word the recommendations in the positive, but you can move the recommendation and then just vote against it.
so moving a planning board recommendation does not
Endorsing it, correct.
indicate endorsement.
You just
So,
need a mover and
okay,
seconder to put it on the floor, and then, so
okay.
you can move something and vote against it.
Fair enough, okay, so Councillor Morrison will move the recommendation and Mayor Dan will second it. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Nay. 4 nay, 0 yay. Defeated 4-0. Yeah, sports are good. Go sports. And it, absolutely, regardless of, yeah, we'll still be on the October 21st meeting for council to make a decision. Full council, yeah. And
Thank
that is
you.
all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Durant. So with that, we'll adjourn the planning board meeting here of October 1st, 2024, and we'll move right into our committee of the whole meeting. So I'll begin by calling to order the committee of the whole meeting of the city of Summerside here at 5:56 p.m. Call for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Councillor Adams, second. Councillor Cameron, I don't know, Bruce, you're throwing things. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed or changes? Hearing none, we'll continue. Conflict of interest declaration. This is the opportunity for any member of council to declare a conflict of interest with respect to any item moved before you on the meeting this evening. Hearing none, we'll move through. Number 4, there are no committee reports or recommendations at this time. Item 5, committee of the whole discussion items. 5A is recommendation with respect to renewable fuel generator engagement plan. And this is presentation from Municipal Services, and I think we have Director Greg here. I think that's where you just went. So when Greg gets here, he's going to give us, there he is. No, it's excellent entrance. Greg, you're all queued up for the renewable fuel generator engagement plan, and I think that's the Dunsky RFP.
Some background a bit on it. The Summerside Electric is trying to advance its green agenda. And the next foray into that would be to look at capacity in a generator that's fueled from the least carbon footprint that it can get and still create security for the community in times of need, and also to help with reducing power purchase costs in the near future from the mainland in New Brunswick. So staff had written, at council's request, an engagement plan to look at the different technologies that are available for renewable generation that can be ready and have some storage along with it. The city has been pretty forward and innovative in its capacity choices to date with its wind farm, its solar farm, and some battery as well. So this is the next stage of going to some type of fuel source that's renewable that we can actually have in storage and need should the main grid not become available. And that the intent of it is only to run it about less than 1% of the time in a year. So that would be approximately less than 100 hours a year of running time. But we still want it to be renewable. So this RFP request for proposal was issued about a month ago. And one proponent came back from Dunsky Energy Group. And they had previously done in 2019 the electric capacity resource plan for Summerside Electric, which we have been actioning for the last 3 to 4 years. And now time has come to look at another source of generation for the facility. Our older plant, which currently runs from diesel fuel, the oldest engine is 1950 and the newest engine is 2015. And in between there we have 4 engines that are older than 40 years old. So this capacity would not only see us meet our growth needs in the community, but also help replace that aging plant that is barely able to keep going. And that's actually part of the second discussion tonight. So in that, we got one price for $155,000 from Dunsky Energy Group to do a request to look at several options, which one is to have a kickoff meeting to make sure they understand the deliverables for the project. And then they want to do a needs assessment on our utility as well. So staff recommended a 30 megawatt generator to them, but they said, well, that's kind of, let's take a look first and see what size we need. So that'll help with that feasibility study, get a second set of eyes on it rather than staff's internal eyes. And then they're going to go out and screen supply side options. And that would be fuel determination of what type of fuel generators can run, what type of technology can be used to bring to bear that would meet the North American Electric Reliability Council needs to be a stable electrical grid. Then they're going to look at all the different options and present them in a report to get an idea of what the costs are to the city against comparable expenses we would have in New Brunswick and possible fuel costs against our current diesel pricing in our plant. And then the other side of it is the public engagement. So the public engagement is a process led by Dunsky where they would bring together open houses and invite stakeholders as well as the public to come in and look at different options of the generator, from air emissions to location to noise to what they think of the project as presented, to get feedback from the community, to see if the community A wants this asset and B understands the need for it. And then finally, after that public engagement is complete, is to present those findings to council for review and adoption of, or acceptance of the report, not necessarily adoption, but you can accept the report as written and ask any questions and have engagement, and also engage council as part of the public engagement for any concerns that might be brought forth for the project. This is a unbudgeted item currently for financing, so we hadn't planned to expend these funds at this time, but the need is getting addressed for a couple of reasons. We just finished our power purchase agreement with New Brunswick, and it started actually in September, and the pricing for capacity increased by about 25 to 35%, depending on the time of year. And that meant that this option, we believe you can own capacity rather than buy from the New Brunswick at equal or better cost. So it's prudent for us to do so against why pay New Brunswick where we can have an asset located in our community that can be used in multiple ways. So the ask really is a supplementary ask of council to spend this money to get this report done. It will take almost 8 months, 6 months, I guess, from start, be about a 7th month from September before they finalize the report. The good news is that the timing would land roughly around budget deliberations in February, March, so you'll have an idea what potential costs might be to the utility, so then you can weigh in on the budgetary impacts at that time. Doesn't mean that council needs to adopt the whole plan, but just accept it at that time. So we're looking for $155,039 to finance from the utility. I understand there are many options to finance, which I'll open the floor to Kristen to see what those options are for the $155,000.
I would suggest that we determine that once we know where the electric utility will be coming in for the 24-25 fiscal year. We may be able to offset that in operations. If not, we can transfer from an unfunded reserve is another option.
So the ask of council is to recommend adoption for it for the upcoming council meeting, or tonight if you do so, to expend the funds to get the report underway.
I would move that we spend the money and get the report done. Norma seconded.
Yeah, I know she has. I don't know if we actually need to vote on it either, but where it's
Oh, you don't?
supplementary.
Okay.
No, I don't think we
Oh, I
have
thought
to.
you
I
were
think we
waiting.
would only go to a vote if there was a disagreement amongst
Oh,
council here.
okay. I thought you
if
were looking
council,
for a motion.
Because we're not looking, it wouldn't put us into a deficit position, so it would just be supplementary dollars. The only thing I would note is that on the timelines there, it says that the start date of September would be February, so if we're starting into October, we're looking at be into March, and it also the dates are wrong. It says completed 2024, not 2025, but small.
2024, 2025,
Yeah.
to be correct.
Yeah, it said 2025, but we'd expect it to be done, not 8 months ago. Any other further comments, questions from council? We did, Councilor McColman?
I guess I just wanted to say, kind of being or kicking around as Councillor McDougall and some of my other fellow councillors for such a, a duration process of this project, this program. I think it indicated like 5 to 6 years, but, right from the consultant's review, assessment, analysis and costing, reporting to the city, the public engagement and presentation and checking in with the community. I think this is an example of a project and work that has taken a long time for it to come to this place where we're now ready to see and try to move that forward. So I think it's council and the city staff and administration did a very good job on doing their homework and making sure that everything, fit to give information to people in the community so that we can make this wise decision for the community. So very good to hear it.
Just one question, Greg. I'm sure when you went out for proposals, you were probably hoping for more than one reply. Is the $155,000 figure close in the ballpark of what you were thinking?
I thought it was a little higher than what I expected, but when I read through their scope, they had a lot more included than what I expected. So their public engagement, I think, is 3 times. So they're having 2 open houses through the fall, and then also having, several meetings with council to explain the report, explain the findings, to understand fully the breadth of what they looked at. And then there is a lot of work in evaluating the supply options. Like you have to talk to suppliers and budgets and costs. And so it's within range. I would have liked to have another comparative. We did invite 6 firms as well as advertise it on the website, but only one had the time to complete and put the effort to. The others said they were too busy at the time to take that on. It was a little out of their field. Dunsky is a well-known company that does this type of work for NB Power, Nova Scotia Power, even the province of PEI, as well as Maritime Electric. They've done a lot of work in the energy industry.
Yeah. And the city has worked with this group before?
Yeah, they were successful in 2018, and they worked through the resource plan that was presented in 2019. So the timing's about the same for that report.
And there was no issues with dealing with this company? Everything was good?
Correct, yeah. Very professional, very, very well knowledgeable in the industry.
Yeah.
Less time to explain things to them. And they also, right now, they also know the community's needs from doing the resource plan
So
last time.
the 155 will basically include those 6 tasks? And they'll
Yes.
And there'd be no fear of any cost overruns on that price or anything that would be?
The only cost overrun might be if there's extra travel required. They put a $7,500 allowance for travel. So if there's more travel than expected, they said that would be extra.
Okay, thank you.
Great, without hearing any objections, then I think proceed and get started, given the timeline's tight anyways. Thank you, Greg. Next one as well as you, and as you're right, connected, this is with respect to the recommendation for power plant maintenance budget as it relates to existing generator in capacity, I believe, generators.
The next recommendation is for more money, obviously. The issue is every year we do maintenance, annual maintenance on our existing diesel fleet, which is getting older every year. And during the course of the annual maintenance, there was identified 4 different topics that needed to be looked at to make sure the engines were reliable into the winter and for the next foreseeable 3 to 5 years, by the time, if we do decide to get more capacity or not. The value on these engines are quite high. If we didn't have them, we'd have to purchase more capacity from New Brunswick. And that purchase cost well outweighs the cost to do this maintenance. So the 4 items that staff went out and budgeted, got hard quotes for, was $113,000 for cleaning the alternators of the engine. So that's to make sure that the dirt and the grime on the alternators and the windings are clean so they're electrically sound when they operate. The cylinders, liners in some of the engines are getting so worn, they're so old that the diesel fuel is getting by the pistons and ending up in the crank oil, I'll say, of the engines. And then the other one, another cylinder for engine 5, all 12 on engine 7, which is our older engine. And then 1 smaller item, bellows, that came in. But all this was identified outside our normal budget ask of the community or council. And so we're requesting another supplementary budget of $245,100 approximately. It's, all the quotes are hard and in, but we plan to install a lot of the pieces ourselves. So with some assistance from some professionals in the United Kingdom. One individual come over with the parts to make sure they go in correctly. And that covers all those costs for supplementary ask a budget for council under the electric utility. And again, it would be planned to plan again to be paid for reserves. There's enough reserves to cover both projects, I'm told, in finance.
You're really pushing her tonight, buddy.
It was totally unexpected. We didn't think they were this in bad a shape, but the report from staff is they're getting to the point where they could cause fires, and fires means losing the whole asset of the power plant. Just some background. In the history of the plant, there was an old, we called it number 3 engine, which was a 1930 engine. And it went along so far that it did cause a fire in the power plant, which was extinguished by help from the fire department and others. And it was lucky to save the plant. The plant itself is worth millions and millions of dollars, obviously. Just to give you some background.
Not like the street sweeper.
Any comments, questions, concerns from council? Again, same issue with this one with respect to the unnecessary for a vote where there's, it's a supplementary and unless there is concerns? No, thanks, Greg. You did present all the details on this in our last meeting as well, and we certainly discussed the value of investing in our energy security for a whole variety of different reasons. Having been through that plant, I am surprised that some of those generators continue to operate to this day. So hopefully these two items will jive in time.
Staff do a great job maintaining them.
They certainly do. Yeah. Thanks, Greg. With that, we move into the collection of questions from Councillor Cameron. Sorry, Councillor Cameron. I would just have a note for folks. Councillor Duran had to leave to attend fire. Councillor Duran is a firefighter, and he has been called to an emergency. Councillor Cameron, number 1.
Great. Hopefully this will be quick. My first question is looking at the parks in the city and the accessibility of the parks. In 2018, for the Billy Bridges Park, was said that it was noted to eventually become a fully accessible park. Wondering if there's a timeline on that. I know that there's some other maintenance being done to parks around the city, one at Legier Park and one at Errol Thompson, Fairview. I don't know what it's called anymore. Neither one of those were accessible, nor was approaching the equipment accessible either. And I'm just wondering why we're not looking, as we're currently doing some renovations, why aren't we looking at them to be accessible?
I can answer that to a certain extent, and then we'd likely have to take it offline and have, or get more information from Director OJ. But I think Billy Bridges Park was identified a few years ago as being an area of focus for accessible equipment.
2018.
And accessible parking, accessible entrance, and a few other things. I think a lot of it comes down to how much we as a city are able to fund, right? It's simply likely a dollars and cents question. So,
oh, it's for sure more costly
Yeah.
to do an accessible park. That being said, I don't think we can put a cost on accessibility to people in our community. Maybe in the past that was not a strong priority for council, and that's fine. I think moving forward, we should be identifying that. Everyone deserves the same right to play with their friends, get on a swing, watch their kids at a park, get close to or go on equipment with their kids, depending on their mobility issues. We should be doing everything we can to make sure that people can access those things. I had one more question and I can't remember. Just give me a second. Future parks, and also our reserves for parks. Do we have money set aside from other projects where they've allocated money to parks that we are currently not using that we could use towards making parks more accessible?
Short answer for that is no. It's a year-to-year budget question. We do have, when developers choose to make a financial contribution, instead of park, like as a parkland dedication, that money goes into fund, but I think that balance is virtually zero right now.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
very
So maybe can we get, some kind of a report from JP, to follow up on what's been done in the past few years, because I know JP's always great to have a capital plan in place for what he sees. And then maybe we could also get an update on the fund that's there, just what it's been used on, what's come in from developers and what it's been used on, just so that people do see that when it comes in, that we do actually put it out for what it was intended for.
And
If that's okay.
further to then maybe as a council, we should be thinking of what we want for future parks and how those will roll out. Because if we're not approaching it with an accessible lens, we are only catering to a certain portion of the population, and I don't think that's very fair to some. So that is probably a good idea to start thinking about as well.
No, I had been talking to JP on the parks, because we have 2 parks in the area that need work, and he said he was looking at the parks here now to see what we need. So hopefully that'll be up for our budget talks.
I realize that the comments that also come in from people is along the boardwalk. In comparison to Charlottetown, they have an accessible area where people can sit out on the water with a ramp and a walkway, that there's benches that people can do that, and that certainly would fit into physical fitness and accessibility. So if there is going to be any type of a report, I think some of those things should be also encompassed into that report, because it is around accessibility and fitness as well, and inclusion.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I'd also just add, we do have a Parks and Green Space plan here at the city, but it was last approved in 2012. It's certainly long overdue I've mentioned that here before, and I've spoken with Director DeRosier about the need to do that. My understanding is that work was going to, at least the discussions were going to start this fall. Councillor Cameron, obviously, I completely support your comments with respect to ensuring accessibility is built into that. I do find when we talk about parks here, people start talking about this park that's in my ward and this park that's in my ward. It's really important for us to look at how we manage all of our parks and green spaces across the city, as opposed to thinking of just one and one off. So this might be a good opportunity to ensure that a variety of different things, accessibility also, in terms of accessibility from a physical and mental needs perspective, but also on accessibility from how close you are to which types of parks, and which types of parks we have to serve which types of things. After we are back to a full team of 8 councillors, I was hoping we would be able to sit down and look at the representative roles, because there are a couple of areas, this being one, parks and green spaces, that requires an updated plan. We also, our arts and culture plan is also of the same age. We've got a number of plans that have sort of sat on the books here for 10 or 15 years, and I know at the staff level, when I've spoken to directors, they are looking for council direction as well to update some of these. So perhaps we can have that discussion and get a Parks and Green Spaces plan reviewed and updated, and certainly take into consideration the issues of accessibility.
Great. continue along. My next question is with active transport. I guess originally it was directed towards the east-west housing corridor, but also I guess ties into Pope Road. And I'm just wondering who did the design, I guess, for the active transport, and how was it determined that bidirectional was more suited than unidirectional lanes?
We did have engineering and design support from a firm in Halifax, and I apologize, I forget the name off the top of my head. But it's a similar answer in that it's a lot of it comes down to a funding question. I think you'll see bidirectional active transportation lanes in a lot of communities. There are a few places around that have unidirectional AT lanes. At this point, though, as we are just kind of in the early stages of trying to build out our AT lanes through the community, I guess at a staff level, it's been determined that bidirectional is where we are for now.
Based mostly on cost effectiveness.
Certainly, like to build AT lanes on both sides of a road would be close to double as expensive. Yeah, and you wouldn't be able to build as many as quickly for sure.
Yep. And with, I guess both the Pope Road and the east-west housing corridor, I know that Pope Road right now, up until the tax center, has a curb side, so it is separate from the road. Once you get to basically where the funeral home is it going to be the same, or will that be separate, more designed towards Greenwood Drive where there's those barriers that
No,
don't
when you
do
get
much?
too close to the funeral home, there's actually going to be a small portion there that is a completely shared laneway.
Okay.
Yeah, and then as we cross the street, the curb is actually going to have to come out and be removed and
chipped
bumped out a little bit. Yeah, as you proceed west.
Perfect. And
down
the
Municipal.
east-west housing corridor, similar, like, it's not going to be like the top end of Greenwood Drive where?
Correct.
Okay, perfect.
If you drive out Water Street East and look down the east-west housing corridor now, you can basically see the outline
where-
of
okay.
where it will be, yeah.
I figure that's what it was last time I drove by, but wasn't 100% sure. Great. I told you guys this would not take long. We're on to number 3 already. Going back to the east-west housing corridor, an email came through from a resident, and she also got up and spoke at the open house about kind of the infrastructure going forward with the streets that will connect into the east-west housing corridor. I'm wondering if we have a plan for that, because she made some very valid points that, I know that Director Aaron said connecting to these roads it's supposed to entice people to go on the corridor rather than the secondary roads, but in reality, there will be an increase onto those roads, maybe not a crazy amount, but some people will take that way. Do we have plans for those roads that are connecting into those subdivisions for sidewalks, to keep people safe who are walking in those neighborhoods?
I'm just thinking about the stretch that's going across into Woodridge Trailer Park right now. I believe that section, I don't want to, I'll have to get back to you on the piece that's going into Woodridge. I can't remember off the top of my head if there's AT and sidewalk going in on that piece already. But in terms of where, in terms of Collin, for example, there's currently no plan built into the east-west project, but that'll certainly be something for council to consider once the road opens up and we understand the traffic patterns, and if there's more traffic on that road, more usage, then certainly be a consideration for council, yeah.
Council, just to sort of add on that as well, The standing committee for planning board is in the process of looking at complete streets. Complete streets, as you know, are in our official plan. That's how we're supposed to be building and designing streets. And complete streets generally include sidewalks and often AT as well. So maybe even, I'm thinking that should be back on, because it got postponed a few times with all the housing stuff. Back on, so maybe when that next standing committee for planning board occurs, I can let you know, and then share what we've gotten from the planning department in terms of what complete streets look like. And how about we go about doing it in the future.
Great.
And catching up on our sidewalk network.
Yeah, great. Okay, last one. I just wanted an update on the green commute and if that is potentially going back out to the public or if that's still staying internal to the city.
Director of HR and Director of Community Services discussed this internally this year before we rebooted the program post-COVID, and it was determined this year to run it internally again. I think that's the plan moving forward, but there's certainly open for discussion, and it might be a good idea potentially for yourself and Kendra and JP to sit down and have a conversation about what you might like to see and some ideas around that, and go from there. But at this point, this year was run strictly internally. And
was there a reason why it remained internal?
Always good to have new directors come on board and new kind of eyes on programs type of thing, as I've been in that role for a number of years. So new director comes in and takes a look and says, why this, why that, different lens. I think it was determined that our efforts to run it externally had, while maybe starting out, had some very kind of broad goals. After a few years, it had really narrowed to only a few companies taking part, sporadic reporting and engagement with a few of the participating companies, a little more challenge in terms of how the reporting structure worked. And I think really what it came down to was, from a HR department perspective, them saying, listen, this is not really an HR issue. This is if we're gonna run this program and offer it externally, this is really a community services driven program. So it's a matter of if there's a will there to align those and potentially doing something next year with it. But
Yeah, I would definitely like to meet with them and discuss, because I think if we're promoting active transport and we've taken this away from the public, without, like you said, different lens, the reporting, instead of figuring out a way to do it, we've just kind of said we're not going to do it for the public. When we've offered it for so long, it could also help with potentially some parking issues at buildings within the city, just to throw that one out there. But yeah, I would love to sit down and talk with them, because I think that might be a really good idea to keep it external, because there are people who do benefit from it, and there's people who are asking about it, and if we are going ahead with active transport, we should incentivize people to use those.
When was it last open to the public? Like, I feel like it was years ago. Was it?
yeah,
Just a
couple
during
years
COVID.
before COVID.
Before, okay, so it was years
Yeah.
ago, okay.
Before,
Yeah, 'cause
yeah.
I remember looking at it and being like, oh, was it
Well,
gone?
it ended during COVID, because I went
Yeah.
when the gyms closed and there was a refund on your membership.
Everyone was on their bikes anyways.
Yeah, well, basically, yeah. So, yeah, during COVID, so about 4 years ago that it was last public.
Any updates, CAO updates? I don't have anything on here. I have it as NA. So with that, council, we will adjourn our meeting here at 6:30 PM. Meeting adjourned.